Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. My name is Ian Fisher. I'm conducting the hosting duties today. We've got a great show lined up for you. We'll be answering some listener questions coming up in the second and third segments, talking about finance and college admissions content. So you'll want to stick around for that. But before we get there, we're going to do a little bit of, I think, story time. We're going to get to know my friend and colleague, Kira Tyler. Kira, hey, welcome to the show today.
Thanks, Ian. So good to be here. I'm excited to do some storytelling.
Storytelling, I don't know. We'll see what comes here. I think
Yeah.
we are, we've been doing this show for a while now. I think we're getting close to 400 total shows, and we've explored a lot of different ideas about essays and activities lists and test optional policies, and we'll keep doing that. But I think we also see opportunities to explore other interesting topics that are adjacent to college admission and college finance. And because of the rich experience of so many of our educators, there's a great opportunity for us to just talk to you and hear a little bit about what your pathway was through your undergraduate career, how you ended up here. And so we're going to do that, if that's okay with you.
Love it. Can't wait.
All right, great. So I want to start with what you majored in college.
Sure.
What was your college major, Kira?
My college major was I received a Bachelor of Music in flute performance.
In flute performance, a Bachelor of Music. And
yes.
How many times over the course of your undergraduate career, and maybe even in the time leading up to it, as you were deciding you were going to be a Bachelor of Music in flute performance, how many times did people say, what are you going to do with that?
I would be a very rich woman if I could calculate that.
So
I'm in my 40s and people still ask me, and I'm like, I have a very lovely career.
Thank you for your concern. I'm doing well. Yes.
I'm doing just fine.
So what was your go-to answer? I think this is something that a lot of students encounter.
Sure.
I think it's like, you go to a family reunion or you're hanging out with people and the question always comes up, well, what do you think you're going to major in college? And then you have an answer to that. And then there's always the follow-up. But how did you handle this given the uniqueness of your major?
Yeah. Sorry. Let me turn this off. People would ask me and I would confidently say, I don't know. Maybe I'll be in an orchestra, or maybe I'll work in arts management, or maybe I will find something else in college that I find equally interesting. And I will tell you, I was never worried, not once. I happen to come from a family who really values the performing arts.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom always says, like, I'm still kind of shocked that you decided when you were applying that that's what you were going to do, because I knew you could do so many other things. And she's right. Like, I was a super academic, classically academic kid.
Yeah.
So she's right. I could have done other things, but I really wanted to further explore my talent and see where it could lead.
I love that you have almost this way of answering a question like that. That's almost like, why are you asking me that question? Like, you think I haven't considered this already? Which I think is awesome. But that idea also of not being worried, I think is something that I've observed in some of my friends from college, in confidence that they'll find a path for themselves, even when their major doesn't necessarily connect directly to a professional outcome.
Yeah.
What do you think creates that kind of confidence? Is it both what you brought to college in terms of who you were, or was it something that developed during your undergraduate years?
So I think it's both. So I gained a lot of confidence even before college because, being a flute player and distinguishing yourself as a strong professional path flute player is really challenging. There are a lot of us and there's a lot of noise. And it's hard to be considered a really good one. And I worked hard, and my parents afforded me experiences that exposed me to what was out there. So I live in a big city, right? I've always been a Chicagoan. I've lived in other places, but I was in the Chicago Youth Symphony Orchestra. We got to travel to Europe. I got to hear my peers who were doing incredible things, and then I got to see them go off and do really interesting things. And
Mhm.
I went to Interlaken for summer camp. And so my point is that my parents were really great about wanting me to see, like, you may be great here, but like, let's see what else is out there. And they weren't pushy, and I wasn't actually super competitive. I just kind of wanted to know where I fit in. And it turned out that in all of those settings, I happened to fit in pretty much near the top, if not at the top.
Mhm.
So I already had a good amount of confidence going in. I went to Northwestern University, which has a conservatory level music school. When I was admitted, I had other great options too. When I was admitted, I was only one of four kids in my studio. So that was another way for me to understand sort of the level that I was playing at.
Right.
And then when
Right.
I got there, I continued to do pretty well. Like I realized like I'm going to have to do things differently if I want to really kind of like be ready for auditions for a professional career senior year or go to grad school at a conservatory like Juilliard or something. And then I started to realize, like, oh, I have other things that I also like doing that music has kept me from a little, right? Like,
Okay.
I
Okay.
wanted to do more volunteering and I wanted to do this cool organization, and that took time away. I wanted to be a cheerleader, which I did until my teacher was like, that's not wise. Like, you're a performer and you don't want to break something.
Yeah.
So I stopped doing that. But so I then started to realize as I got closer to like my junior recital, you have to do a recital. And then my senior recital, I was like, okay, I've loved doing this. And I know that I could go further if I wanted to, but I think I want to use my skill set doing something else.
And that's you're saying junior, senior year in college was
Yes.
when that decision came up. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, yeah. I just got flashbacks to PE class and getting kicked in the hand in soccer like 3 days before a violin audition. And just like
Right.
it's just like, dude, why?
Why?
Why would okay. Anyway, I was like, oh, cheerleading and flute. No, those things don't mix.
Yeah. Big
Um,
Ten cheerleading and flute don't mix.
it's interesting though, because I think as you're describing this, it feels like you maintained a lot of momentum with your interest, but there wasn't any particular kind of fork in the road where it was like, I'm going to decide to do this now. It was just, I'm going to keep doing the things I'm interested in
Yeah.
and see where this takes me. And there
Totally.
may be a point at which something else grabs my attention more fully.
Absolutely. I really, again, my parents are incredible. And the goal in the house was you go to college to explore.
Yeah,
Like they were not like, you've got to find a professional path. You go, we're giving you these 4 years to figure it out. Doesn't
yeah,
really matter to us what you decide, but we want you to take advantage. And I did. So I also, I will say, Ian, I used summers. I went to, it's very typical for kids on a performance track to do summer festivals, right? So I did a
sure.
festival my before freshman year of college and the same one again the next summer. And then I decided like I wanted to get an internship actually outside of performing sophomore year, between sophomore and junior year. So I got an internship with my youth orchestra doing like arts management kind of stuff.
Okay.
And then my junior year, I was like, maybe I want to go to law school and be an agent. And so I had an internship with a talent agency.
Yeah.
And I also did some things in college to kind of build up my resume because I'm not stupid, right? I knew people were going to be like, who do you think you are with this performance degree?
Sure.
And so I also had a bunch of other stuff that I knew could also be transferable as well.
I think that's key because we often get parents that will ask these questions about a student's academic major or whatever it is they're focused on in college, and the perception is that that's going to be the exclusive content of your college experience.
Right.
And you're describing a way in which your musical performance major opened doors into very interesting internships and professional opportunities that you might not have had access to if you were an English major or a history major, because you wouldn't necessarily have had that opportunity to plug right into those spaces. So it's kind of
I
a
would agree
cool
with
way
that.
to leverage an existing talent that you have.
Yeah.
I want to go back to this this question about, you've got a really supportive family, believes in education, that you treat
Mhm.
college as an opportunity to explore.
Mhm.
I very much had a similar kind of experience. My parents both being, professors, they have this belief in higher ed as an opportunity to explore. But I also think is that right for everyone? Right. We don't want to send the message here on the show that like, yeah, just go figure it out. You're going to be fine. I think that there is something to this prescriptive element, but like, how do you think students should think about the balance between a career focused pathway
Yeah.
versus this more exploratory option?
Sure. It's a great question. I do realize that's a huge privilege, right? Like a lot of people, their parents aren't doing that or their guardians or whomever. And so my husband's the opposite. His
Yeah.
parents basically were like, "You love to draw, you're going to be an architect." And they told him that at 6, and he was like, "Oh, I'm going to be an architect." And he's never, like, so I think the goal is like, let's try to find a happy medium. And I really believe in experiential opportunities, right? So, like,
Yeah.
think about your skill set. Think about, for me, Ian, one of the big, I marinated on it for a while, and I knew I wanted to lead a certain lifestyle. And most importantly, I wanted to have some autonomy over where I got to live. If you are a professional musician looking for a job, you audition where the jobs are.
That's right.
And I knew that there were certain parts of the country that were off limits to me, not interesting, and that there were other places I was really interested in. But like, how many times does a New York Phil seat open, and let alone am I gonna get it? Odds are no.
Yeah.
So, I think it's a combo of like this idea of, let's think about what you're good at, let's think about what the interests are, and let's see how you can pull those together in both a major, but also utilize the opportunities that are available extracurricularly. Use your career center. As a music major, I used my career center.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I just took it all in. I think sometimes we think about these majors in a silo, like, what's a humanities major going to use? Like, what's a sociology major going to use the career center for? Like, what kind of internships are available? And it's like tons,
Yeah.
lots,
Any of them,
any
like,
of
yeah.
them, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't count yourself out. And so I just let myself try as many things as I could to find what I wanted to do.
To what extent do you feel there were moments where your major prevented you from having some
Sure,
sort of an exploration or some sort of an experience? Setting aside cheerleading, which you couldn't do alongside, the music performance.
sure.
Where was it limiting?
That's such a good question. So, in my degree, 3/4 of my academic time, music is academic, everybody.
Oh yeah.
So, of my academic time was spent in music, and then the rest were spent in other academic disciplines. So, music takes up a ton of slats. I also was on the quarter system.
Mm-hmm.
So, the weeks move really quick.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was interesting. Um, and so, the limiting piece for me that I still think a lot about, I don't regret it, but I wish I could have had it, study abroad.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard to fit in a study abroad if you want to have an internship. If you're on a performance path, you've got to get, your recital out, blah, blah, blah. That's really hard to incorporate. And also, if you do, it can be really limiting because you probably want to go to like a conservatory or somewhere in Germany, you know what I mean, that has a music piece so you can continue your studies. So that I really wanted to do, but it wasn't in the cards. And I didn't want to use my summer to do that because I wanted to have a more traditional internship. So I would say that was probably the most limiting, but otherwise, I found a way to do everything else that I wanted to.
And you also talked about before going to college that you'd had
Yeah.
this European travel experience, right? And
Hmm.
and so it's not quite the same as study abroad, but I think
Sure.
where you're missing certain elements of a college experience, there are ways to build that into the rest of your life exposure.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
so, I mean, how do you use it now, right? Like that's always the
Oh
question. It's
my
like, okay,
gosh.
well, you've made this story, like you majored in music,
Yes.
you decided to find another path. You've got a great, rewarding career. You're really good at it.
Thanks, Ian.
Yeah, you got it. But then how do you use the lessons learned from musical performance? I think a lot of people would say, well, that's just down the drain. Like it's not actually something you use every day if you don't perform. What's your response
Yeah.
to that?
And people, when they realized I wasn't going to pursue music professionally, were also like, well, obviously you're going to change your major. And I was like, oh God, I'm digging in even more now. No way. Like I'm seeing this thing through. So the way that it plays a role in my professional life right now and has is that I, number one, believe firmly in my abilities, right? Like And you have to do that as a musician. If you do not
Sure.
believe that you're good at what you do, you're going to crumble in an audition and you won't get a job. I also see it from the perspective of I'm very focused. I'm incredibly disciplined. If it has to get done, I'm getting it done. And I take feedback really well. I don't take it personally. I see it as a means of improvement. And so I think it's really those things that have stayed with me. I don't play as much as I want to. My daughter's a cellist. I play with her. It's made me a really good cello parent.
Yeah.
She's an actress. My talent agency days sort of show up a little bit here and there, but it is not a waste. I think it's a real asset, and I think people appreciate that. And I really appreciate the performing and visual arts as well. They're really hard. It's really hard to get good at it, and I want people to see it as like a valuable way to spend time.
Valuable. Yeah, definitely adds something to, I think, an understanding of others, of expression, emotion. It's really powerful.
Yeah.
And I think it is really important. How do you live with intonation issues with your child's musical performance? Because man, my kids and their violin performance, I just have to like be out of the room sometimes.
Right.
It's rough.
Well, you and I talked about the violin and why my kid didn't start on the violin because, right?
And I made that mistake twice
You made
over.
that mistake
Yeah.
twice. Um,
It's going great, by the way. But yeah, go ahead.
I'm so glad. She's a beautiful musician. She also has a really good ear and she sings as well as plays the cello. And
Mhm.
so she doesn't have intonation issues. Like her teacher, even a couple days ago, was like, her intonation is pretty stellar. And I'm like, I know, it's weird, right? She has a really good ear. We listen to a lot of music,
That
which I
helps.
think is the way to, yeah, to do it.
Okay. All right. All right. Okay. Well, I gotta, sign up for more of that, I think. Kira, we could talk forever about
We really
music
could.
and yeah. So, but thank you for coming on and
Thanks
telling
for
us a little bit
having
about
me.
your story. The time flew by. So thanks for
I
being here.
know. Love being here. Thanks, Ian.
You got it. All right, folks, when we come back, we'll do some listener Q&A. Don't go away.